Hello, everyone. I'm Jeath with Echo. Recently, Blizzard very generously gave us the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with Associate Game Director Morgan Day about the most recent Race the World First in Vault of the Incarnates. So, I was joined by Meeres, and we had a fascinating conversation with Morgan about how the race has impacted Blizzard, including testing, tuning, and of course, the elephant in the room, nerfing. He did not shy away from talking about not only mistakes, but also what they've learned about how to prevent those mistakes in the future. And he was very candid about Blizzard's efforts to promote a fair, even playing field in the Race to World First. So, take a look to see what he had to say, including a sneak pre announcement of some upcoming changes they're planning for the game. Enjoy. Well, since we haven't met, if you don't mind telling me real quick what it is that you do at Blizzard.
Yeah, totally. So my name is Morgan Day. I am one of the associate game directors on World of Warcraft. And most recently, I was working on things like dungeons, raids, systems, combat rewards, things like that. Lots of fun stuff.
All the big meaty chunks of the video game. Well, that ties in obviously just coming out of a Race World First, this being a World First guild. That ties directly into most of the questions that we sent you, which have to do with the most recent Race to World First. I was really curious when we learned that we had this opportunity to talk to you to find out what impact the growing visual spectacle of the Race World First has had on Blizzard and Blizzard's approach to the game and raid design and things like that.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of how it affects us, I'd say in a lot of ways, and it has in fact impacted us, tremendously since it really became more popular. The Race World First has always been a thing. For as long as I can remember, there's been guilds that have been, kind of going for that first kill. But it used to be a lot more private, right? Like it just kind of happened behind the scenes. It's fun. I've been able to spectate them long before they were streamed. We would just kind of jump in the client and game and watch people. Like I remember watching, Lei Shen, Lich King, Black Hand all the way back then. But having the community be able to share in that experience has been really, really awesome. And it has affected, quite a few things about how we approach the race now. I think the most kind of noticeable one, I think, on our side is just like the amount of support that we have on our side. Like there's essentially 24/7 support for, quite a while the race is going on, just so that, when a bug pops up, if there's a tuning issue, if there's anything that happens, like someone is there, ready to take action. Where in the past, if when people went home, like in someone, let's say a European guild might have run into an issue, unless someone happened to be around, that might not have gotten resolved. So that's a really, I think, big and awesome area that has been great for, I think, not just the community but also the guilds that are participating. Another area I would say, we've always taken this into consideration, but I think it's become a lot more of a focal point, which is just like the sensitivity to the integrity of the race, right? Like previously it was, we know we want to make a change, so we just make it. Now it's, well, we have to take a lot of consideration into how or when we make this change, right? Like, is it going to feel more advantageous for one group versus another? Because we're talking about different time zones here, right? Like it's very different. So even if we know we need to make a change, oftentimes there's just lots of discussion that needs to happen around like, okay, well, what's the best timing for this? That's definitely something that has influenced, or that has, influenced us. What else? Yeah, I mean, and I guess we are just talking about this earlier, but now that, it's streamed, everyone gets to see the whole journey, not just like the YouTube video that goes up after everything's dead. But that also kind of means they get to see warts and all, right? Like things that have always happened, but now there's just a lot more visibility, which has really changed the perception of things like, splits, for instance, or something that gets talked about all the time, right? That's not new, right? Like I was trying to remember, like, and if you all know, please let me know. But the first time I can think about it becoming like really popularized was during Cataclysm, right? Like I think people always did
Yeah,
splits, but that was when like, the spreadsheets got involved of like, all right,
yeah,
this group and
yes.
this main and these ults, and like all of that kind of happened um around Kata, I think. But yeah, there's just so much visibility now on the splits. It's been pretty interesting. And frankly, I think streaming changed that a lot, right? Like we said, everyone used to do it, but you would just have your alts. Where now, guilds like you all, and there are other like really big guilds that can kind of engage their community, and they have this huge community to draw from. That has really changed things dramatically. Like it's frankly, it's a really unique advantage that I think a few guilds have, where they can just draw from this huge community and do way more splits even than we used to. And then also tuning, like I promise there's been times we've had to tune a boss that someone was on, but it just never had visibility because it wasn't in the YouTube video, right? But there's just way more visibility on that stuff now, so we try to take a lot of care to make sure our targets are right the first time around. Lots of other things too. I could probably talk about this one question for like like an hour
Yeah,
by itself, but just
a,
those are some areas that I was thinking about.
a huge amount to unpack there. I think we probably could spend hours talking about that. Meeres, it looked like you had something. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, no, I want to say, I mean, it is true, the visibility and also the like 24/7 support and whatnot has been like really amazing for the last races, and has really helped like all the top guilds to see what's happening and like having a clear communication, because that was always like a thing in the past where it was maybe like you said, some people were not home and it was hard to see when things get changed, and now it is like really clear and whatnot. But tied into this, I can go into kind of a like next question a little bit.
Yeah,
How
sure.
is it looking with Blizzard being like more involved into the race to world first, in a way that they maybe like plan their own events or make tournament realms in a way for the event that is more with a global release that is just more easy to get into as well. Like you said, it is pretty unique to some guilds to have a mass community to have them with splits, but it's not always possible. So
Right.
it is interesting, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in terms of our involvement at Blizzard, or the World of Warcraft team. Yeah, we just talked about like how much we're already involved, even though we're not
Yeah,
like hosting the event.
exactly.
And frankly, like I don't know, I love the community-driven focus, like the kind of grassroots nature of it. And we feel like our role is to just ensure the integrity of it, make sure everyone has a good experience. Not just you all, but also the community. And like it's kind of what makes it so magical. And I don't think, other than just what can we do to better ensure that the experience is great for everyone, we don't really have plans to kind of step in and do it ourselves, right? Like I know people look at MDI as something that we run on our side, but I think when it comes to the race world first, like just the community approach has been so fun to see.
Okay.
Well,
I mean,
I mean, I guess with that said, like I'm always open to feedback and love to hear, either from you all or the community, like if there's areas that you would like to see improved that we can help with. Um, that's always something we're open to.
yeah,
You
I mean for sure. Like,
go ahead.
go ahead, Chief. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna pivot. So if you have something that, you should go.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's an interesting. I don't have anything insightful to say about how much involvement Blizzard ought to or maybe should have in the race world first, but an interesting thing that touches on that you both brought up was these kind of ideas of advantages that the really established large teams have with regard to, like you said, Morgan, drawing upon the community to do vastly more splits to a much greater degree than anyone else can. Another one potentially being things like access to that information that you talked about, where there's this 24/7 support pipeline of information flowing back and forth between Blizzard and the top guilds. Is that something that you sometimes think about? Maybe not getting involved in the race world first, but helping to make sure that it remains reducing those barriers to entry for maybe a new team that maybe won't have access to that information, but wants to step into the race.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we consider. And like you said, like when you think back to many expansions in the past, if there was like the newcomer who wants to come in and challenge, in the top 5, like you would see that pretty frequently. Actually, it was pretty fun to watch, kind of the dark horse come through, where that the likelihood that would happen, I think, is reduced today, given you said, like what we've been talking about with those unique advantages. So I think on our side, we talk a lot about, well, what are those advantages? Where are the areas that we feel like, we could make changes without, and to me, this is really important, without like, somehow making the experience worse for everyone, because really we're looking at the broadest audience and what the experience they're having. But I know like set bonuses, especially with their reintroduction, that's the thing that people have talked a lot about, and like the viability of a character that doesn't have their 4-piece. And I know that's often what a lot of those are targeted around. There's actually some pretty cool changes. I guess I can announce stuff. Hopefully nobody gets mad at me.
We certainly will.
We're talking about, like for season 2, when the next raid tier comes out, making some changes to the way that you can acquire set bonuses. Like ideas that have been thrown out are like, okay, what if, there's like an Omni token that can drop off the end boss so that you can get any set item, not just, the specific set item, or something where there's like, a seasonal achievement that once you get that, once you achieve that, you can also potentially get a specific set item. So, what are ways that we can look at leveling the playing field there for everyone, and also make that kind of a better experience for everyone? Because, not just does do I have my 4-piece impact you all, it affects anyone who plays WoW. And, where once upon a time, I think set bonuses were looked at as this goal, this thing to strive for that might take me a while. More and more and more, they're becoming this thing where I just feel incomplete until I have it. It doesn't feel like a goal. It feels like something that I must have to be viable. So we've definitely talked a lot about that. We have some changes we want to make for season 2, but there's more to explore there for sure.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I can go into like a question a little bit away from this.
Please.
Basically, in terms of when it comes to the race word first, and like you said, obviously you're paying very close attention to what we're doing and whatnot. Like how is it looking there? Did you see anything unexpected from like the top guilds playing the bosses, where you were maybe like, oh no, this boss is maybe not intended to be played that way, like maybe we need to change it, or maybe I think in the past there was Nerf where this happened, where back in the days the boss just got nuked and the secret phase got skipped, and then you were like, oh no, that's not the best.
Unexpected strats. This one's kind of funny, like, we've learned over the years that the community will always find a way to surprise us, right? Like, so like we design the fights with a lot of potential solutions, right? Like we don't design with a specific strategy in mind. We always want there to be opportunities to be creative and to have agency when you're coming up with the solutions. So in that regard, like, I guess we always expect to be surprised.
Okay.
And like, so that's kind of how we approach that. And then, like, I know you mentioned the like N'Zoth getting nuked. There's definitely, especially now that we just discussed, like have a lot more live support, and people are always watching no matter what time of the evening or day it might be. You mentioned N'Zoth, but I think it was also Sylvanas, where like there was in the intermission where the ads were being kited, and like very much on the fly, or like, well, that's not intentional and that's going to be bad. So there's definitely changes that we might make on the fly before the boss has been defeated that we wouldn't make after the boss has been beat. So yeah, there's definitely some some stuff that happens there.
I mean, to give some insight on the Sylvanas, like we obviously made the strat and we were like, okay, we need some more damage, and we were like, okay, let's hope Blizzard does not fix it before we kill the boss. That was basically the idea of the strat. Yeah, like we were like, okay, this is not how it's gonna go. Yeah, like, but maybe we kill it before they wake up.
Right.
But yeah.
And that's actually. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, before we knew that you were watching 24/7, maybe they won't wake up and we can kill it.
Right, exactly. Like, well, yes, we were definitely watching. That's an interesting one though, right? Because that's like a strategy that, how to phrase this, right? Like, we definitely recognize that you all and the other Race for World First groups, like, you're the ones that are going to be essentially creating the strategies that the rest of the community might emulate.
Yeah.
So sometimes, we do make changes to a fight, even, after it's been defeated, because, ultimately we want to make sure everyone has a good experience, for the entire raid tier. And if there's a strat that's like, wow, this just looks not fun. And yes, it did surprise us actually. So, when that does happen, we'll often talk about like, hey, what are changes that we can make that would fix this? We call it like buff nerf, where like maybe you have to buff a certain part of the fight, but to just not feel like, wow, they just made this fight harder after somebody killed it. We also look for areas to nerf it. There's a bunch of examples where we've done this in the past, like Lihuvim, I think, is another great example, right? Where like we stepped in on multiple fronts at a certain point where we kind of had to adjust the design because the strategy was like, very specific timing required to do this strategy. And it's like, wow, this is just like not fun if you have like bad ping or something, right? Like let's loosen the bolts on that and make that so that it's a more, interesting strategy to execute. But then also like, I think we added like raid damage or something because that fight was also like way under healed, which is also not great because it's like, it stinks to be, in a mythic guild and, you're pushing content and it's like, hey, you have to sit because, we only need 2 healers for this fight or whatever, right? Like, that's not something that we feel like is a great experience. So we try to make changes when we see stuff like that pop up.
Makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of really rich topics to unpack, and I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into some of those. You talked earlier about obviously trying to maintain the integrity of the race and maintain fairness and an even playing field, and you mentioned timing of changes, which is obviously a really big topic from the most recent race. There were a few changes to Raszageth that occurred, and there was a big controversy, particularly about the latest one and its timing. I wondered if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, totally. So, like Raszageth was an interesting one. Like there were some pretty major nerfs that needed to happen, right? Like there was the intermission nerf and the shield nerf. I think they were both like 50%, which is not trivial, right? Like that's a ton. And also it's not a coincidence that they were both 50%. Like we made the same error in both of those places. But in terms of timing of those encounters, or the changes, absolutely. We knew kind of going into the race, the proximity of where it could lead up into going into the holidays. And I definitely feel like, the 50% nerfs that happened, those were something where we talked about a lot and felt like, again, when we talk about integrity of the race, how important it is that when we make a change, we're not just saying, okay, cool, this is going to be like we're handing anyone any progress. It's like, okay, let's make a change. Let's say if we think we need to make whatever, it's like a 20% off. Actually, let's make it like a 15% nerf so that there's still room for mastery there, right? Like there's still room to grow and learn how to get over that barrier. And before we make that change, like we said, there's timing involved in when do we make that change to make sure that it's fair. While it can feel bad to say like, well, we're just waiting for Blizzard to nerf this, often it's like, well, when we make that change, it's not just going to fall over all of a sudden, right? Like that would be just as big of a mistake in the other direction. There's still like damage that needs to be found. And with that instance in particular, that was the target. That was what we were aiming for. And it just so happened that like, the very next poll was an incredibly like clean, like the best poll by a long shot, right? Like it was like, oh my gosh, that was so much better than anything we had seen. So like the timing of kind of what was able to be executed along with the nerf, like we felt like we were hitting that target of, there's still going to be a lot of work to be done here before it can be killed, but this is manageable now. And ultimately, like the tune-in on Raszageth, there were definitely some misses there. We could talk about that more, about like exactly kind of what went wrong there. I think that's an interesting topic as well, but we definitely learned lessons, and we need to do better, right? We'll do better.
Well, from my perspective on this race, I was kind of watching instead of participating as a commentator, and it was interesting because after the major nerfs you mentioned, the 50% nerfs to, for example, the intermission and the shield, we saw exactly what you were describing, where the guilds were using that not to steamroll the encounter, but to then find ways to pool damage to apply to difficult hills to get over. And that was really interesting to watch. So I can definitely see what you were saying there. But you're right. You said something super interesting, that there wasn't a coincidence that the platform and the shield were both nerfed by 50%. You said those were the same error. I'd love to hear what that error was.
Right, totally. It was interesting. I was digging into this a lot after it happened, because like that's not a small number, right? Like 50% is like, really 50%? Like how'd that happen? And like, you know, ultimately I think when you take a huge step back, like with Dragonflight, we had probably the largest change we've ever had to like the tuning and systems of how our combat and classes work with the talent revamp, right? Like talents had such a huge impact here. You know, it's an exciting new system, and it put us in a territory with a lot of unknowns about like what exactly players are capable of. So we definitely made some assumptions about what was possible when it came to how much you could like optimize for single target or cleave. And when it comes to end bosses in particular, you know, a thing that we talk about a lot internally, you know, I've spoken about it as well in the past, but like we really look to test a lot of different things in an encounter. Like it's not just, you know, like Taros is like the single target fight, right? And then you might have like the cleave fight with the council, but we want to make sure that we're testing a lot of different things so that ultimately like your composition is pretty well balanced and isn't really stacked too far one way or another with specific classes. So we designed a fight that was testing your ability to do all these different things. And like really our big mistake there was we tuned assuming like, so it sounds silly, right? But like we tuned the numbers assuming like, okay, you're gonna be able to do your cleave damage on this part and your Taros damage on this part. And I think that speaks volumes about like kind of how awesome the talent system is. But you know, when we were tuning that encounter to be on the razor's edge and we're pushing against all these different damage profiles, we made some, you know, frankly, pretty bad assumptions. With that said, like, I think we've learned that lesson now, right? Like we have a much clearer picture of what the impact is there and what players are capable of in terms of, you know, what they can build and what they can spec themselves to do. So yeah, it was a bit of a painful lesson, but ultimately, you know, we're really happy with the talent system. We're really happy with how much interaction people have had with it through rating, and just kind of shows the strengths of the system. And, you know, we had a lot of lessons to be learned there.
That's really interesting, because what I heard, Meeres, was he said, they expected too much of you, and if only you had gotten good, you could have done that damage.
If only you could change specs in the middle of the fight, we would have been fine, right? Like,
and the thing is,
I mean, that is true, yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people who say that they love the fact that they use these different builds for all of these different fights in the raid. So that is definitely a strength of the system. But go ahead, Meeres.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I must say, definitely props to the talent system. It is one of the biggest and like best changes. I can confidently say that our players were still cooking up that the, like, as a saying, the talent builds 200% into Raszageth was still changing things around, be like, oh, maybe this is cooler, maybe this is cooler. And that's an amazing thing, of course, yeah.
And
so,
like the you know, Hurricane Wing was no different, right? Like there were assumptions made about like, how are they gonna deal with this, right? Like, you know, if you're a priest, what are you gonna do? And, you know, through, you know, basically co-op, you know, abilities and, you know, your Dracther rescuing you and your Warlock Gateway and all that stuff. That was something where that was successful, right? And people were interacting with abilities that they might not have normally picked up in the tree. So that's the other side of the coin where, hey, that was actually a big success.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, basically, because we're also a little bit short on time, I would just like to add on this topic real quick. Do you personally think that the lack of Heroic Week was making it harder on you guys to like tune and find out about the different damage profiles and talent builds and what people use, because everything was kind of meshed together in one? Or was it more like a thing that you were like kind of confident in figuring it out from the early mythic bosses?
So yeah, definitely. I think it impacted the race. The lack of Heroic Week rather impacted the tuning. And, you know, actually, frankly, just in what we talked about, right? Like learning how much the damage could swing on one fight to the next just based on talent assumptions, and that is something, like I mentioned, moving forward we have a much better understanding of that. But ultimately, like, I think having all of the difficulties come out at once had a lot of benefits, right? Like as a Mythic Plus player, you don't have to always ask that question of like, wait, what level key do I need to do this week, right? Like there's always that awkwardness. If you're a Mythic guild who, maybe you do Heroic week 1, but you're gonna get into Mythic. Maybe you walk in, you can get your 2 bosses dead in the first week for your vault. It just feels like a much more cohesive experience for the broader audience. And we know that there are challenges in terms of how that might impact you all and the people who are participating in the race, but we also feel like those are all solvable problems, and ultimately, like, we think a better experience for everyone. So it's very likely that that's something we would carry forward into the next grade tier, but we also do recognize the challenges that it does present for other groups, right? Like, the front-loaded splits aren't ideal, I'm sure, for you all in the audience. But then again, like, even when we did have the raid coming out on different weeks, it's not like those weren't done still.
That
right?
is true, yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely challenges, and we're talking about how to potentially resolve those, because again, we do feel like overall it's likely the best direction for the game as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree for the overall experience. Like you said, it was really nice that everything was unlocked and you didn't have to wait and do different things, or not for us, it's maybe not the most pleasant, let's say, I guess, but I think for the overall player base it's probably a good experience. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping we have time for one more question that touches on a lot of the topics we were talking about. Sure. Because you mentioned earlier that the race has impacted how you do tuning, and you made some assumptions with regard to, and you mentioned earlier bosses where you look at a single target damage profile or a cleave damage profile. Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about tuning a boss before the race and then doing changes during the race? What sorts of data you're looking at?
Everything, right? Definitely, we're always looking at our own internal data, or what damage people are doing on encounters, all the way from normal to heroic to mythic. And we do have just based on our own models that we're building, we have assumptions around how much damage people are going to be doing at a certain item level with certain amounts of tier set bonuses, or tier gear rather. And we will, as quickly as we can, kind of verify those assumptions against what we're seeing the actual players do. And yeah, there was just a lot of moving parts this expansion with the new talents, a lot of the crafting stuff, which was really awesome, but there's a lot of fun craftable stuff that you can do that kind of throw a wrench in some of the tuning there. So we look at as much data as we can, and certainly are moving as quickly as we can to make adjustments as we're testing those assumptions. But ultimately, we have a lot of confidence in the model that we build, and it's in our ability to be agile. How about that? It's very easy to make some quick adjustments that will impact a lot of different fights all at once, just based on oh, whoops, we were wrong on that number, because we're obviously seeing this boss die a lot faster than we thought it would die. So we have a lot of internal data and tools that we use to verify, as well as just what the feedback that you all are giving us, or other people's anecdotal experience. So anything and everything, right? not the most exciting answer, but yes.
No, it actually is the most exciting answer. I wish that I had hours to talk to you about that. 'Cause as a data guy, it's very, very interesting to me. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about these issues. It's really fascinating being able to pick your brain about the internal view. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all, and it's always fun. I'm always happy to talk about stuff like this. It's a good time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much as well from me, of course. And hopefully we get the opportunity again, maybe after the next race, with even more updated things. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I would love to. Can make a habit out of it. I love chatting
It
about this
will
stuff.
be amazing. Yeah.
It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much.
You
Thank
as
you very
well.
much.
Yeah, have a good day.
Bye.
You too.
Wait, isn't it like 1 a? Isn't it like 1 a.m. for y'all?
Nice, kinda. Yeah. I mean, it's like 1:30 now. Yeah.
Oh no! Well, thank you for staying up so late to chat with me. I'm sorry.
No,
But anyways,
don't worry.
cool. Yeah, you have a great night.
Thank you.
I'll talk
Thank
to
you.
later.